Picture this. It's the spring of 2010. Plenty of things from this time will be remembered. The oil spill, the Affordable Care Act, hot tub time machine, et al. Other things will be completely forgotten, like this, the Microsoft Kin, the worst cell phone ever brought to market. Microsoft pumped $1 billion into developing this thing, and people hated it. So much so that they didn't even sell 10,000 units, and by some reports, they only sold 503. Just 48 days after release, they pulled the Kin from the shelves and hoped we would forget it ever happened. But here at HAI, we remember, and we ordered one from eBay. And today we're talking about all the brilliant choices Microsoft made that made this thing a colossal failure. The Kin arrived in that window where cell phones were everywhere, but smartphones were still more of a luxury. The idea of the Kin was to make a lower-priced, non-smartphone that catered to the younger, social media-loving crowd. A core feature was something called the Kin Loop. Basically, a home screen where all your communications, like texts and calls, but also emails and posts from the people you follow on Facebook, Twitter, and MySpace, would show up in one big chronological feed. That feed also appeared on Kin Studio, a website you could open in any browser, basically putting your phone on the internet. That was convenient, but also helped the Kin get away with not being as smart as a smartphone. See, the Kin didn't actually connect to Facebook, Twitter, or MySpace. It just connected to Kin Studio, which itself was doing the work of pulling the data from social media. Essentially, Kin Studio was the neighborhood gossip who went around learning everyone's business, and the Kin itself was where you met up with said neighborhood gossip to get all the juicy details. Again, none of this is in and of itself a terrible idea. Creating a phone targeted at a younger, more social media-y consumer with a sub-smartphone price could have worked. I mean, it even had a Zune experience. But in practice, it was a massive, overly expensive, hardly functional flopzilla. Here's a brief survey of some of the Kin's issues. The loop at the center of the user interface, which was supposed to be the young user's 24/7 IV drip of social media content, only updated itself when you told it to, or every 15 minutes. The social media clients built into the phone were weird in and of themselves. On Facebook, you could only see and post status updates. No friending, liking, poking, commenting, or anything else. Twitter was similar. You could see and post tweets, but you couldn't view replies or search and post photos. And I don't know what the MySpace client could do, but the site was already on a steep decline, so who even cared? Also, there was no app store, which would be one thing if the phone could do everything a hip 2010er would want to do, but the Kin phones lacked a calendar, a calculator, voice notes, any kind of maps, a standalone YouTube app, and worst of all, games. How am I supposed to use a phone with no games? Also, if your phone is supposed to be deeply social, it's a pretty big oversight to lock it in with Facebook, Twitter, and MySpace and have no way to add or change those apps going forward. Instagram launched 6 months after the Kin, and Snapchat came about a year later. So without knowing, the Kin was halfway to obsolescence upon release. The whole point was to be cheaper than the iPhones of the era, so is it such an issue that it was also worse? Certainly not, but oops, it also wasn't that much cheaper. The Kin 1 itself initially retailed for $150, and the slightly swaggier Kin 2, which had a bigger screen and a better camera but all the same problems, went for $200, though it was pretty easy to get $100 off either. So they cost less than the $200 to $300 iPhone 3GSs, but uh-oh, what's this? Buying the phone locked you into a mandatory 2-year plan with Verizon, with a $40 minimum charge for calling and a $30 minimum charge for data, and unlimited texting would be $20 on top of that? Yes, to all the above. You, the consumer, were expected to pay almost, if not more, than the phone's cost every single month just to use it. Meaning, the people the phone was supposed to be for, who wanted smartphone features at brick phone prices, couldn't afford the monthly cost of owning a Kin, and any rational consumer that could afford that and wanted Kin's purported services would be much better off saving up just a little bit more money and just buying a smartphone. Perhaps this is why the Kin Facebook application only ever had 8,810 active users. This phone just wasn't for anyone. Microsoft announced the Kins 1 and 2 in April 2010. They went on sale on May 14th. The reviews were mid to bad, with some praising the idea of Kin Studio, but with just about everything else universally panned. On June 29th, they dropped the price of the 1 to $30 and the 2 to $50. On July 1st, they announced that they were abandoning the Kin product line entirely, including scrapping the European rollout they planned and shifting the team that worked on it to work on the next Windows Phone instead. An anonymous executive was quoted around the time saying, in simple terms, that the Kin 1, quote, was killed abruptly because no one was buying it and there was no credible reason to believe anyone would, which strikes me as solid reasoning. A postmortem on Engadget described the Kin as, quote, practically raw in the middle, which is unfair because a cookie that's practically raw in the middle is delicious and the Kin tastes awful. I know because I made my writer try to eat it. So how does a product this flawed get to the market? Developing the Kin took 2 years, and the first step for Microsoft was acquiring a company called Danger. Danger had made the Sidekick, the coolest and most iconic phone ever. I'm editorializing, but I really wanted one, and Microsoft wanted to use their IP and cloud computing expertise to build their new line of cool kid phones. They spent $500 million to acquire Danger and proceeded to squander every opportunity that acquisition offered them. They decided that instead of using either the Sidekick's operating system or the existing Windows Phone's operating system, they developed a bespoke one for the Kin that took forever and cost tons of money. The delays angered Verizon, who by the time of launch were mad enough at Microsoft that they ditched the cheap plan they'd intended for the Kin and went instead for the expensive mandatory one that rolled out, on the grounds that all that uploading would eat a lot of data. By the time of launch, nobody involved in the Kin was that into it. Danger was gutted, Microsoft knew it sucked but had a contractual obligation to Verizon to fulfill, and in Verizon stores, employees were cautioning people against buying them. Allegedly, many of these poor decisions boiled down to weird politics within Microsoft and between its divisions that caused people to ignore the product's problems and set it up to fail. Why this infighting had to ultimately hurt the small handful of people who fell for it and bought the Kin anyway, I do not know. It's a cruel world. Perhaps the final nail in the Kin's coffin, though, was its marketing. We can set aside Microsoft marketing two different lines of phones that didn't really share features or an operating system, though that was confusing. I'm talking about this ad in all of its 2010 faux hipster glory, showing a bunch of people using a Kin while this band performs that Alabama, Arkansas song that was so big at the time. This ad does not tell you about Kin Studio, allegedly the best thing about this phone. What it does do, however, is show a seeming teenager taking an up-the-shirt pic and sending it to some girl, which didn't necessarily have parents of the world clamoring to get their teens this phone. All to say, inside out and top to bottom, every wrong decision was made to create this piece of junk, but thanks to basically contracts, it was sold anyway for just 48 glorious days. And now, even if you buy one on eBay, the folks at the Verizon store can't get it working for you, and it's toured the world in the Museum of Failure. Not a bad paperweight, though. If you hated that ad, stick around for a much better ad for a much better product. This video's sponsor, Factor. Factor delivers fresh, chef-crafted, pre-made meals right to your doorstep that are ready to eat in just 2 minutes. I've been a real-life customer of both them and their parent company HelloFresh for years now because they make it so easy to eat healthy, nourishing meals at home. Like this pasta dish, which, along with being delicious, featured cavatappi, the best of all pasta shapes. But if that's not your vibe, fear not, because Factor has tons of options, over 100 per week, tailored to your dietary needs and goals. I'm talking high protein, no carb, no shellfish, no pork. Whatever you need, Factor's got you covered. So whether you're trying to build healthier habits or keep your good habits from slipping, let Factor help you out. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code HAIFB50 to get 50% off your first Factor box, plus free breakfast for 1 year.